Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's topic is going to be a topic about walking away from your previous life, walking away from bad company, walking away from your gangs that you was involved with, or any gangs or any bad company that you had. And once taking that decision to walk away, not to look back, not to backtrack, and to have the strength to continue to move in the direction that you chose initially for yourself, to leave that company, leave that background, and leave that lifestyle. So many of us, growing up in inner city London, we automatically become a part of a gang, whether we like it or not. It's clear that living in the UK and living in the West, that every postcode has a gang. And whether you want to associate yourself with that postcode, just by living in that area and being raised in that area, you get labeled with that postcode. So you go to school, they ask you where you're from, you tell them where you're from. For my example, South London, whether it's Peckham, Brixton, Woolworth Road. If you go to school outside of your own area, you tell them you're from Woolworth Road, straight away you're a Woolworth Road boy. You go to another school, you tell them you're from Peckham, automatically you're a Peckham boy. As soon as we go into education and secondary schools, we find that, that divide that happens amongst the youth, and everybody gravitates to those that's in their local communities and in their local areas, and then you grow. Many of us growing up, we never chose the gang lifestyle. The gang lifestyle chose us. It was a part of our decree from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala growing up that we found ourselves from nowhere one day just being a part of a gang. I grew up playing football in a football pitch with my local friends, and as time grew, we just formed into a gang because we was always associated with our area. And sometimes being bullied or attacked or threatened because of where you live, you seem to go to defense, being the best, or your defense is being the best way to attack, is that you become defensive. Someone sees you as something, whether you are or not, they keep on saying you're this, you're this, you're that. You say, okay, I've got no choice. This is what I'm going to be. This is who I am, and this is how I'm going to, carry on navigating through my childhood as being a gang member, whatever. Things start off small, you having little fights, you're throwing stones, then you're beating up another boy, then he's beating up one of your friends, then it becomes a bit more tense. One of your friends wants to take it to the next step. He brings a knife out from his kitchen. You're walking on the streets. He stabs one of them. Next week they stab one of yours. Then you grow up. Next minute you're carrying guns. They shoot one of your friends. You shoot one of theirs. The cycle continues and continues until most of the time we end up dead or in jail. But as young men or young women, we get to a time of our lives where we never set out for this. Most of us, I would say 8 out of the 10 youth out there, they're not naturally bad people. They don't have that killer instinct. They've become a product of their society. So now you are doing things based upon peer pressure. You feel that if I don't do it to him, he's going to do it to me. And most of the beefs that we have, we forget how they started. How did it start? Why does he want to kill me? Why do I want to kill him? Why does he want to stab me? Why do I want to stab him? Most of the time we forget why it even started. And it starts from petty little things that escalate into lives being taken. People turning up to your parents' houses, not being able to go shopping, with your parents and things like that. But when you go through that lifestyle and you get to the point where you have that opportunity to leave it, whether you're a born Muslim and you start to gravitate back to practicing your religion, or you're a revert to Islam, and Allah gives you that opportunity of showing you the guidance through Islam, and you want to leave the streets, is that you make a decisive decision based upon intellect and intelligence. Nobody forces you to walk away from the streets. Nobody forces you to start praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody forces you to do anything. You take this choice upon yourself to start to practice the religion of Islam. So on this journey of practicing the religion, there's many things that make an individual backslide. With my own experience, since coming to the religion of Islam some 8 years ago now, I found that many of the things that make an individual backslide by speaking to a lot of people is that many of us walk away from a lifestyle, but we never truly hate that lifestyle. What do I mean by this? This is similar to an individual that might smoke and he wants to quit smoking. So what he does, he stays away from cigarettes or cannabis, but he doesn't hate it, he hides from it. And it's only a matter of time until he's faced with the cigarettes again or the cannabis, and due to that he doesn't have the hate for it in his heart, that he still desires it, he always finds it easy to backslide and start to smoke again and start to, take these intoxicants. But when an individual looks into smoking, once he stops, looks into cannabis and looks into the effects, what it does to the body, the diseases that it causes and the harm that it does to him as an individual, he starts to hate it and starts to want to stay away from it, because he understands, he's taken a decision based upon intellect, and he knows that there is no benefit for myself as an individual, and also it harms others around me in terms of those that take in that passive smoking. Similar is a person that is trying to leave his old lifestyle. You have to understand that the lifestyle that I'm leaving is something that I want to understand why I'm leaving it. Why are you leaving the streets? Why are you not going to hang around with the bad boys no more? Why are you not going to carry a gun no more? Why don't you want to carry knives no more? Why don't you want to be a part of the streets no more? Because you know that no benefit comes from it. You know the harm that it brought to yourself, it brought to your family members, it brought to people around you, and it brings to the whole society. You understand this and you hate to be next to it. So you make that choice not to go back. In our journey, and I know most of you, how many times have we heard, a young boy say, next year I'm going to give up the gang life, next year I'm going to stop selling drugs, next year I'm going to do this, next year I'm going to do that, and they never make it. They end up getting stabbed, they end up getting shot, and they end up passing away in that state. And many of us will bury the young individual and will make the excuses that we can for him, that he was a good individual, he tried, he done this and that. But in reality, we know that some of the Muslims in our community and some of the young boys are some of the worstest type of individuals on the streets, because they cause fear and terror into the hearts of our other Muslims within our community. Many of the young boys, especially in the Muslim community now, since I've moved to East London, and interacting with some of the young youth in Whitechapel, is that their problems and their fears and their issues arise from other Muslims. It's not from non-Muslims. It's not that they're afraid to walk the streets because there's some non-Muslims after them. They're afraid to be in public with their parents because some non-Muslims are after them. They're afraid to come to the masjid because some non-Muslims are after them. They're afraid to go to the masjid because Muslims are after them. They're afraid to walk in public with their parents because Muslims are after them. They're afraid to be out in the open because Muslims are after them. These Muslims, do they have parents? Do they have mothers? Do they have families? Do they have communities? Sadly to say, these Muslims are our children, our families, our community. And it's got to a point where we're distanced from each other. Many of the time where I live, we'll go and pray our salah in the masjid, and I'll speak to the young boys and I say to them, do your fathers pray in it? How many of you does your fathers pray? Out of the 10, 7 of them will raise their hands and say, my father prays in that masjid. I said to them, how do you think it feels for him to know that everybody in that masjid, being in the community that we're in, is a cultural community, a strong, tight-knit community. They all know who your fathers are. They all know who your mothers are. They all know what family you belong to. How do you think it feels for your father to come to the masjid when the whole community knows his son is out there selling the drugs outside the front of the masjid? It's his son that's with the girls. It's his son that's doing the robbery. It's his son that everyone's afraid of. I say the least you individuals can do is pray when you're close to the masjid. I'm sure that this will bring some joy to your father's heart, that maybe he's praying and he turns around after the salah and he can see his son in the 4th row, the 3rd row. Even though he knows what you're doing is haram, but he has that hope that that you're trying. The least that we can do, and as Muslims, is pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hold on to our salah, and also think about our family members and think about our fathers and how they feel. Many a time as youth, we do things that, we don't think much about it. So we get to a point that, we become disrespectful and have no regard to those that are around us, and and how we affect people, and how, the harm that we do within the community affects others. So when we get to that point where we've been through that lifestyle of being that person that people were afraid, of, being that person that was causing the terror in the community, because many of them do come back to the masjid, many of them do come back and start to be some of the role models and the leaders that people can look up to and say, look, that brother was like that once upon a time, but look at him. He becomes a beacon to the other young youth that are also following a similar footpath, but think that nobody's ever done it before. Because something that you get is that when you speak to the young youth, they think that they're living in a time, or they're living some type of lifestyle that you have never experienced due to your age and due to you not being in touch with what they're up to. But what we say is that when you become that beacon in your community that the youth look up to, and you've turned your life around, it's important that you understand that you're backsliding, you're going back to that lifestyle, you going back to being that individual that you once was, does not just affect you, because it's the hope that the young youth that they have when they see you and they think that they can achieve what you've achieved. They look at you and say, this is an individual that he used to sell drugs, he used to be in gangs, he used to be, have that name that everyone was afraid of, but look, mashallah, he's in the masjid, he's praying, he helps out, and they look up to you. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises you onto that level and that pedestal of changing your life around, and people come to you for advice and nasiha, and they've seen that you've been able to openly in public change your life, and you've walked away and you backslide, you affect many of the young youth. They start to think, look, he was in the masjid every day, now he's just like us. What hope do we have? How are we going to be able to do it? He was an individual that we looked up to. He was an individual that we thought he changed his life around. But you know what? He's just still after the money. He's just still after the girls like the rest of us. He's just still after the dunya. And this also goes to us as fathers that have children, to understand that our children are not stupid. Our children, are living in a time where technology is causing us to grow, to become. Sometimes technology is moving so fast, we're forced to move at the same pace. We're forced to move at the pace that the technology is moving at, so we can just sustain ourselves within the environment that we're in. But we're not ready to move as fast as technology. Sometimes we need those rural surroundings where we can just contemplate about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand what we're doing and why we're here. But as parents, sending our children to the madrasa or to the Quran schools or to the mosque, and they don't see no Islam on you, they don't see you attend the lessons, they don't see you take that step into, living the life that you're trying to make them live. It's just going into their ears and it's coming out the other ear. Their role model is not the sheikh or their teacher in the masjid. Their role model is you yourself. Whether you drink, you know, and you try to, or you drink, you smoke, you do many things that you tell your children not to do, but you do yourself. These things are a form of backsliding. These things are a means of you, you know, going closer to Jahiliyyah than you are to Islam, and it affects those that are around you, especially your children. One simple thing that happens a lot, you know, as parents, and sometimes we can underestimate, is that we teach our children how to lie and how to become deceitful. Because someone will call your house and you'll tell your child, tell him I'm not in. And your son can see you as clear as day, that you're in the house, you're here. But you say, tell him I'm not here today. Tell him I've gone to the shop. And then after making something as clear as a lie as that, you'll start to lecture him about lying and being honest and being truthful. But naturally, he's learning these traits from you yourself as an individual. So we should take time in terms of how and think how we're dealing with our children and how we're approaching them. These things I've been able to see myself as a person that lived on both sides, in terms of I was a Christian until the age of 20 when I embraced Islam, and I had a long part of my life living as a Christian, attending church, and growing up in a household where things were, you know, those lies were being told. Many things that were contrary to how I live today as a Muslim was a part of my life, and I see where some things went wrong and how Islam has been giving me an opportunity with my children to grow, to bring them up in an environment which is different. One of the biggest advantages of not backsliding and not going back is that my children get to see Islam through their parents. They get to see Islam firsthand. It's not something they learn in the masjid and they never see. They get to see, you know, things like the Sunnah prayer, things like, you know, attending the talks with our teachers, things like, you know, trying to establish Islam to the best of your ability with your family. They see it firsthand, and it's important as parents ourselves, because we go through trials and tribulations, and sometimes we backslide in our attitude. We backslide in the way we deal with many of the things, and we think that our children are not attentive and they're not listening and they're not watching, but they are. So it's important that we ourselves, once, you know, we've walked away from certain habits, certain lifestyles. Walking away from the streets is a term for the youth. But here we're talking about walking away from sin, walking away from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, walking away from any type of haram. And once walking away from it, trying our best never to go back to it. Many of the times we hear the story of the man that killed 99 people, and we look at it and we hear it, but we don't really contemplate and understand, you know, the journey that he was on, in terms of, you know, how he strived to find that place where he could change his life, you know, for the better, you know, and how he was ready to travel the distance of the land to get to that place where he can have that change, walking away from sin, walking away from his life of Jahiliyyah, walking away from them crowds. Because most of you got to understand that what you have walked away from is no shadow of a doubt, you're walking away from the hellfire. You're walking away from people, even ourselves, as we can reach the ages of 50 or 60 or whatever age it may be, and we have those individuals in our lives that we know as friends, he's no good. Whenever that friend rings you, you know there's trouble, and you've stayed away from him your whole life because you know he's an individual that if you're low and he grabs you, anything is possible with him. So even ourselves as parents, or we grow older, and sometimes it might be hard, we're finding it hard, you know, to maintain bills, paying our children's school fees, putting our children through private school or Islamic school, and maybe we're not working, maybe we're going through some financial difficulty, and there's friends that you know, that these friends, they have money, they have wealth, and they've acquired it through haram, but you know, if you ever needed it, they could give it to you. So sometimes you have that moment of weakness where they might be able to entice you, to doing it, and you think, let me just do this one thing, and then I won't do it again. This is not just only for the youth, it's also for the elders amongst us this can happen to any of us. But how many times have we heard that so-and-so, he went to do something and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took his soul. Took his soul in that state, took his soul in that, that mind. There's a story that I'll share before I end this, and it was of a young brother, something that I've done on RTI media, someone that I gave shahada to, as a brother that I was trying to mentor. He grew up with me, young brother, 21 years old at the time, and he had left the streets, started to practice Islam, and he had acquired some money that he acquired from the streets, and it was some £7,000 to £8,000, but he was happy with what he had. He had accepted Islam, and he said, this is money that is going to help me just stay away, buy my time, practice my religion, find a job, but I have some money, so let me live like this. But by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah tested him he lost that money, so he had a choice to make, and that choice was to continue, striving with no money after having so much at a young age, or to go back to the streets. And Allah knows best what happened, but he ended up going back to the streets. And I was speaking to him, and he was like, look, I'm just going to try to make back some of the money that I've lost, and as soon as I do that, I'm off, I'm done, I'm trying to do the deen, this is what I'm trying to do, I don't want to live that lifestyle. And I spoke to him on a Friday, and he had just come out of prison, and he was like, once I make this money, I'm done. He's like, but my iman is low at this point. I want you to meet me next week, Thursday, Friday. We go to Jummah, we sit down, we eat, you remind me of Allah. I was like, no problem. But by the Monday, I got a phone call that he was shot and he passed away. So it was rahim Allah, and it was like something that, even for myself as someone that came from that background and that was used to people dying around me, it was shocking to know that I spoke to him on Friday. His ambitions was to go to the masjid the following week. He wanted to practice, he wanted to strive to be better, but he still had that one foot in that lifestyle of Jahiliyyah. And by Monday, he was murdered in his own neighborhood that we grew up in. The same neighborhood maybe he rode his BMX, his skateboard, his mother used to walk him through, the same area where he would walk through to go to school, the same area where he would go through to pick up shopping for his mum, go to the shop to buy some new tracksuits, trainers, the same area, the same walk pathway that he was shot in is a pathway that many of us, we walk through on our daily lives living in that area. But never did he know that this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to take his soul. Somewhere that he visited regularly, somewhere that he grew up, in a community, that he was born and raised in. And he died again in a community based around the same group of friends that he went to school with. The same group of friends that he grew up with, in some stupid arguments, overheated, and he was murdered, and he passed away. And alhamdulillah, we were able to pray the janazah over him and bury him as a Muslim. His family accepted it. But it was a reminder to us that we might have our own plans of, we're going to walk away from the streets, we're going to change our lives this, and we're going to change our lives then, and like this and like that. But none of us truly know when we're going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we walk away and we make that decisive decision that I've had enough of the streets, I've had enough of the road, I'm not going to pick up the phone to certain people, I'm not going to roll with certain individuals, I'm not going to let them, trick me, because how I came at that point when I embraced Islam earlier, when I could get a phone call from my friend, and my loyalty to my gang and my loyalty to the brothers was a deep loyalty. One thing that parents have to understand is that this bond that the young men gain on the streets, it's a bond that is similar to the bond that the Muslims should have in our brotherhood. It's a bond that we as Muslims, sadly, we don't have the same bond today as gang members. Gang members live and die for each other. Gang members leave their house 2 o'clock in the morning. at one text message saying, I need you to come now. Hasn't explained. This is how we used to leave our houses. No explanation what the problem is, what is happening. We guess straight away the worst scenario. He needs a gun, he needs a knife, he needs my help, and we leave. We don't think about our parents, we don't think about if we're gonna die, we don't think about anything but to go and to protect our brothers, so-called our gang members, our boys, my postcode, my man them. This is it. No one ain't violating me, no one ain't violating them. We live and we die by the, the laws and the codes of the street. So when you're trying to get your children away from that lifestyle and you're trying to get them away from that bond, you have to understand that that bond is a very strong and a tight-knit bond, and you're going to need a lot of help and a lot of work to get them away from it, and it's not going to be mere words. They're going to need some actions from you, they're going to need some effort from you as a parent, as an uncle, as a brother. And for us as reverts, why we find it easy to walk away from the streets is because we exchange one gang for another gang. We exchange one loyalty to another loyalty. We don't have no culture, we don't have no Islam is this, Islam is that. We just say we're leaving this life for that life. So what happens is the Muslims we find in the masjids in our areas, you become our brothers, you become our family, you become our gang, for lack of better words, and we live, by the permission of Allah, to help, to be around you, to support you, and to do for what we've done for my friends, for the Muslims. Many of us as reverts, we sit down and we say that we used to risk our lives for the non-Muslims by a blink of an eye. So what are we prepared to do for our brothers then? That's why you find many of us, we don't have shame in wearing our thobe when we come to Islam, or the beard, and being proud openly. Sometimes a lot of people say the reverts, they come, they start to practice, they start to give dawah, they're not shy, because we wasn't shy to swear in public, we wasn't shy to be the worst type of individual in public, we wasn't shy to carry guns and knives in public. Now we're doing something that we see as good. Where is the shyness in this? Why do we need to be humble and shy and scared? We are proud. We didn't grow up in a community where people looked at us and said, oh, he's a Muslim, he's a terrorist, he's that. We don't understand that. We grew up where people said, he's a gangster, he's a bad man. So we're used to it. It's nothing new to us. Being labeled and being, called names or being put in a category. So that's why the work that we try to do with the brothers is that we understand what the young brothers are going through. We understand their peer pressure. There's nothing like the peer pressure a young individual can faces at school when bombs take place, Muslims are, chopping heads and doing all these type of things. I can imagine being in school today, the first thing I would have said to a Muslim was, how's your uncle Osama? That's the first thing I would have said. How is your, uncle the terrorist? Is he still hiding in the cave? That would have been a standard joke for me to a Muslim. And I wouldn't have thought of how it would have affected him in terms of his character, in terms of how he's going to be interacting with us, because no shadow of a doubt, that is something which is sensitive, and that's something which makes a person go in his shell, because who wants to be, how is your uncle the terrorist? Who wants that? Nobody wants that, but as young children, we're insensitive, they don't really think about what they say and do. And this peer pressure is a peer pressure that our children face dramatically going through the school system in public schools. So we have to have patience, we got to understand them, we got to work together as a community, and we got to try our best to walk away from sin, walk away from past lies, and kind of carry on this journey as a community. We know that Islam, we're an ummah, we pray together, we fast together, we do hajj together. This is an ummah that is collective. We are one body. We're not this, like before in Christianity, he faces that way, he prays. We face one way. We have one qibla, one ummah, one people, one message. We do things together collectively. So we got to, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, continue to support and strive and help each other, and especially the young brothers, not to be too harsh when they do backslide, but to understand that we also, as parents, backslide in our own ways, and they see it from us. So sometimes they think, you're a bit of a hypocrite, Dad. you're a bit of a hypocrite, mum, because I saw what you've done, but you're here telling me something else. So let's take time, let's think, let's, try our best. And that's my talk for today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Lots of good advice. Which gang do you want to belong to? We're in the gang we should belong to. We need to bring others to this gang. Okay? Important things. What company do you keep? And this is advice given by the Prophet ﷺ. The brother mentioned the man who killed 100 people. And there seemed to be no hope and no salvation. But what advice was he given by the scholar? He was told to go to the community. He was in a bad community. He was told to go to a good community. Lots of good advice for parents, in that their actions are looked at very carefully and minutely. But also, one of the things of Islam, right, is that we need to look at ourselves. I actually can't change anybody else, but I can change myself. And this is one of the things that everybody needs to tell themselves. We can help others change, but in actual fact, the only person we can really change is ourselves. And if we make ourselves better, then those around us, inshallah, would be better. Action speaks louder than words, from what the brothers explained. It's how you behave. Do you have halal means of earning? What should you attach yourself to, and what should you keep away from? Any questions?
Don't be shy.
Yeah. Should be lots of questions. Please.
My question is, how can you stay away from being a gang member when you are a teenager?
As a teenager, no shadow of a doubt that it's about making decisions, and once you've made that decision, to stick by it. Like I said, many of the teenagers, I believe, they're under peer pressure and they need a hand, they need a helping hand, they need someone in the community to come and to approach them. They need to see a way out. One of the problems that we face is that the life of a gang member is glorified. Even if we look at movies, there's no good guys winning. All the bad guys are the people that we want, are the ones that are the cool guys in the films. They're the ones that have the money. They're the ones that have the girls. They're the ones that have everything. Within the main cinematic films that, reach the top of, broadcasting, the bad guy is always the good guy. It's the roles have been reversed. Nobody wants to be that simple, individual that, lives through life doing what is good. So we have to understand that the odds are against us in the community and in the society that we live in terms of trying to get the young youth away. But it's something that we all have is our fitra and our natural state of being, which the soul yearns for. And when a person commits haram, it has an effect on him. And many of us know we don't need to be told, but we need to see a way out. We need to see an example, a role model. And that's why we know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was sent down as a guide, as the best of example and the best of role models in terms of his character and how he treated other people. So if our youth are not seeing role models, they're not seeing, a way out physically, and not just, it's not just something that they hear, but it's something that they can see, then we hope that, inshallah, with the permission of Allah, that they're able to find that way and able to take that stepping stone. And that's why the brothers that I work with, we find that it's important that we keep ourselves relatively still in the community, even though we all have our own families and things that we're doing, that we allow ourselves to be seen by the young youths. Like I said, I live in East London, and I make sure that I take that extra step, to walk around the way to the masjid where maybe I can see the youth, because it's a reminder to them. Because slowly but surely, some of them, they start praying. Some of them, out of shyness, they say, oh, is it time to pray now? And they might not come, but maybe the first salah, they come. And then, when I see them in the masjid, they make sure that they let me know they're in there. They'll be like, Assalamu alaikum, just to so that they can see that they're trying, and they are trying, but I feel like we need to help them and show examples for ourselves, and Allah knows this.
Any more questions?
Sure.
Jazakallah khair. What advice would you give to somebody who they find it really difficult to just completely cut their old crowd? They don't have the guts to tell them that we're not associated anymore.
This, again, it comes to the peer pressure in terms of, but it's about the company and finding another crowd that you're comfortable in, that you can be yourself, because friendship is something that is very timid. It's something that comes and goes. It's not like family, because even the closest friends that you have, there's always a limit. There's always something that your closest friend can do that you say to yourself, no, I can't forgive him, because that's how we are as human beings. We're not forgiven as much as we would like to think. But when it comes to things like many of us, who has been in that position where you had to go to a school after leaving primary, you was in primary school and you had to go to a secondary school that many of your friends weren't going to, and you didn't want to go to that secondary school. You tried your best not to go to that secondary school because you couldn't see your life in that school without your old friends from your primary school. But when you got to that secondary school, within the first 6-7 months, you forgot those friends that you had in primary school. You see them on the main road and it was like, yeah, what's up? And you kept it moving. Yeah, because you had grown and found new friends in a new community and you lived your life. But it's that taking that step, that initial step. As human beings, we're afraid of change. Many of us, change is not something which is simple, it's not something which is easy. And it's something that is an unknown. What's going to happen when I change how I live? What's going to happen when I change what I normally do? We're afraid of change. So it's important that the young brothers and sisters, they conquer that fear of change and they trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they take that step, and without a shadow of a doubt, they'll forget about their old friends within a couple of months.
But what if they're scared of being called a snake or whatever?
Yeah, this is something, again, it comes to the peer pressure, being called names, being attributed to maybe you're somebody that can't be trusted. But again, it's just another trick, or it's another trick that fear plays on you, because fear comes in lots of forms. Maybe you're not going to find no new friends in the Muslim community. Maybe they won't understand you. Maybe they won't trust you. Maybe your old friends won't trust you. Maybe it's just not going to work. So many maybes, so you don't take that step of change. But again, it's the same aspect. You've got to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you've got to forget it. Many of us, when we left the streets suddenly. So we had 3 weeks prior to becoming Muslim and starting to practice the religion, we had beat somebody up, attempted to murder somebody, stabbed somebody, attempted to shoot somebody. And then we've left that lifestyle, become Muslim, and then many of the brothers that I speak to, they've run into individuals that they tried to shoot, and they've never seen each other since that incident. And when the individual sees him again, he sees him as a Muslim. He doesn't even recognize him until he kind of looks in his face and he thinks, that's the guy that tried to shoot me. But many of the times the brothers, they say something enters their heart at that moment and they just move on. They leave it. It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's also from the change they see in you. That key word again, change. They see that you're not doing what you used to do. Most people want to fight people that want to fight them. And when somebody doesn't want to fight you, you don't find the challenge in it. When somebody is not putting up their back against the wall, I'm going to beef you, I'm looking for you, he's like, I'm not involved, I don't want nothing to do with it, you leave him, because you don't gain a reputation from fighting somebody who is a weakling, who is a nobody. You gain your reputation in the streets from fighting those that are tough, those that are hard. But as from Islam, it changes us, we become soft and gentle and we mind our own way. So there is no benefit for him to attack you now, because he's going to attack you and go, yeah, my man, I beat him up. Everyone's going to say, look, he's Muslim, man. He's not on nothing. So what does that mean? It's not going to build your reputation, so they won't waste their time. Allah knows this.
Last question.
Assalamu alaikum. Question is, what advice would you give to a Muslim brother who's involved in drug dealing?
The drug dealing aspect is an aspect that is a deep one, and it's a talk within itself in terms of the amount of people that you affect. As we know that many parents are suffering with their children being addicted to drugs, their daughters being addicted, their sons being addicted to drugs. And many of these parents are practicing Muslims that pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, raise their hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, curse the one that sells drugs to my son. Ya Allah, break the back to the one that sells. So this is your situation as a drug dealer. You know, you have people raising their hands to the sky in the middle of the night, you know, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy you, to punish you, to humiliate you, and, you know, to bring you to the worst of affairs. And this is something that I can say to a Muslim. A person that believes in dua, believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believes in, you know, the dua of the parents, and understands that, you know, the power that dua has. This is enough of a reminder for you to know that it's not a simple situation that you're in as a drug dealer, you know, because even the dua of the one that is oppressed is answered. So don't think they're kuffar, they're this, they're that. You know, if these kuffar also call out to Allah and they say, oh God, may you just destroy this man that is selling drugs to my children. You know, out of oppression, their dua is accepted. So this is your situation as a drug dealer, so take time and think about it.